So what we're going to do at the front end is that, as many of you know, we asked our context advisors to participate in a discussion about the issue, population and workforce shortages. We did that some time ago, put that piece together, edited it, and posted it about 2 weeks ago. Our hope is that most of you had a chance to see it, but I want to give each of our context advisors an opportunity to kind of recapture the main points that they made. And I'm going to ask Dale Knapp to start with the population numbers, ask Dennis then to comment about some specialized impacts and opportunities, and then ask Matt Kurz to talk specifically about the mobility issue. So Dale, give you an opportunity to kick off.
Thank you, Jim. Yeah, my name's Dale Knapp. I am the Director of Forward Analytics, the research arm of the Wisconsin Counties Association. And I've done a lot of work on both population and workforce. And I think that the main point that I made in the video was this area where population and workforce intersect that we don't think about very much, and that's with our young people. As we know, that the youth of today is our workforce of tomorrow, and we're facing some challenges in terms of young people in this state. We've seen the number of births in Wisconsin decline for 12 of the last 13 years. In 2020, the number of births was the lowest that we've seen since 1942. So that's part of our long-term challenges is we're seeing these declining births. But if we expand that out and we look at our under 18 population, we are down 81,000 in terms of our under 18 population compared to 2010. So if we think about it, that being our workforce, they're going to flow into the workforce, over the next 15, 20 years. That's going to create some challenges because on the other end of that, we have significant numbers of baby boomers, people my age, that are going to be retiring. And in fact, we don't have really enough young people in the pipeline to fill those jobs. So this workforce shortage that we're facing now is being exacerbated over the long term because of what's happening in terms of the size of the young population, which ultimately means migration is going to be critically important for Wisconsin over the long term to continue to grow or at least maintain our workforce. And so we've got to not only focus on a lot of workforce issues, but we've got to figure out how do we turn around that pipeline that we've got over the long term, start growing that population so that 15, 20 years from now, we're still able to fill all of the jobs that we have in the state.
Yeah, and so with all the information that Dale's laid out, and some time ago we looked at what the possible ramifications of a flattening, much less declining workforce would be, and we looked at education attainment trends, and we looked at earnings by educational attainment trends, and what we saw is that as early as 2025, that per capita income in the state of Wisconsin could start to decline. Now, when we first did the study, that was a little ways away, but 2025 is pretty close now. And so the ramifications of that are, from an economic standpoint, are huge, because if you have a decline in per capita income, then you're looking at things like the tax burden and what that becomes and how that increases. And then with the tax burden comes all the other kind of public services and infrastructure that are supplied, and what the cost of that is, or what the priority list of that is. And that's everything from schools to sewerage to roads to broadband to social services to child care provision and nursing home provision, et cetera, et cetera. So as far as the quality of life thing goes in the state, right, everything that we're looking at comes down to a critical need here, and how do you attract people into your communities or into the state if you're facing some of these greater challenges that are all brought on by essentially the underlying fundamentals of the demographic trends that we're seeing.
Yes, thanks, Jim. Hi, everyone. Matt Curis. I'm a community development specialist with the Division of Extension at UW-Madison. And just to build on what Dale and Dennis just talked about, this is an issue that's been building for a long time in the state of Wisconsin. If we think about the numbers of individuals of prime working age, of those 25 to 54, they decreased statewide by about 151,000 individuals simply because they aged out of that age cohort. It's certainly not isolated to one part of the state either. There were only 2 counties that gained prime working age residents over that period, and those were Dane County and Eau Claire County. If we look at the total working age population between 2010 and 2019, that number declined by 44,000, and only 8 counties increased in their total numbers of total working age population. If we think of the residents aged 65 and over, they increased by 240,000 just over that less than a decade period. And between 2025 and 2025, this number of individuals aged 65 and older is projected to increase by another 193,000. So quite a bit of growth in that age cohort. We think about migration. It's certainly going to have to be part of the solution to our workforce challenges. The bigger challenge, however, is that Wisconsin is facing a number of trends that it'll have to find a way to overcome. First of all, the state of Wisconsin has not had significant positive domestic net migration really since the early 2000s. And even during that period, it was only about a net of 4,000 to 8,000 people, 4,000 or 8,000 people per year. If we also think about greater trends in mobility and migration, we look at migration rates in 2019, so before the start of the pandemic, they were the lowest they've been in 73 years. And that's across all types of moves, people moving from house to house, people from moving from county to county, or people moving across state lines. And it's also declined across all age groups, particularly among younger adults. They're simply moving less and less compared to prior decades. If we think about people moving across county lines, that's really only been about 3.5 to 3.7% of the population since the Great Recession. And if we also think about people moving across state lines, it's only about 1.5 to 1.7% going back to 2010 and forward. I think the other issue that we have to consider is the mobility of our workforce within state lines and within labor markets. If we look at the people that are crossing state or county lines, to go from their place of residence to their place of employment, the share of those individuals has increased over the last 15 years in both metro counties and non-metro counties. In non-metro counties, it's now more than half of the workers that live in a county cross a county line to go to their place of employment. So I know we talked a lot about collaboration in the opening, and we talked about collaboration in the prior session. When we think about this issue, this is one that crosses municipal boundaries. We have to think about how our counties, our cities, our towns, and our villages all work together on this issue.
Great, thank you very much. We're going to now turn to our local leader panel. And I think what our context folks have described, and I would piggyback on that with my view based on the work we've done at Competitive Wisconsin, which is essentially that the context on a statewide basis, at any rate, is one in which we simply do not have the bodies we need to sustain the workforce that we currently have, and the employer base that we're currently trying to maintain, that the ramifications of not addressing that issue suggests that the economy gets weaker because per capita income goes down, jobs don't get filled, your tax base starts to erode, all sorts of issues. I'd like to start by asking our local leaders to comment on whether or not that sense, that phenomenon, that lack of mobility, aging workforce population, employers not being able to fill jobs, is part of the horizon you're seeing in your area. So let's start with that. And Steve, Mayor Genocide, if I could ask you to kick off for us, I appreciate it.
Sure, thank you. And again, watching some of the videos, not only talking about workforce, but infrastructure, quality of life, it seems like it all plays together. It's certainly ramified much greater, I think, in our community. We're a population about 11,000. We have our largest industry, I think, in Terry Marinette Marine, Navy shipbuilding. And we've been gearing up for an increase in production, and approximately 2,500 workers are on the site a day, about 1,000 of those subcontractors. But with the award of the contract and a great collaboration to bring that contract here, we're upwards of the next 2.5 years have to fill 1,000 new jobs. And for a community our size, that's a huge task that we're going to have to reach out to a lot of partners, including the county and other local and state officials to help us with. And the biggest thing we keep talking about here, and I think Melissa and Dan have talked about, it's housing, affordable housing, that people can move into an area and, we all say be part of the community. They help our school system for their cost and revenues. They certainly help tax base, and getting those workers to come here is probably the biggest thing, and find that housing and daycare. Those are things that certainly are important, as another component of it. But the biggest thing is to try to attract new workers with our young talent leaving, sometimes not only our community, but the state even. So try to get them to come back, recognize the value of our community, and, help build our workforce.
Yeah, I sat in on the last session. I was listening to Melissa and Adam and Danny, and I'm just struck by the complexity of the challenges ahead, and also how different regions think about addressing the problems that they're confronted with. Up here in Superior, it is a Twin Ports area, so we are a border community and share that border with Minnesota. So, we're very attuned to these kind of issues. And I'll take it sort of the way Chancellor Gowd in the last session. One is as an employer. It is very difficult. We find it difficult to attract people to the Northland. Okay, it is Superior. There is weather involved. I will admit that. But it is a challenge to get people to thinking about moving. And so we're trying to figure out ourselves, how do we, as an employer, make this an attractive place to be? Either by allowing people to address childcare issues and elder care issues by working remotely, or other flexible schedules. So that workforce component is certainly one that we feel. The other is, I think there's a challenge for us. We want to be good partners with our community. So we're trying to help the community as we do hear these issues in terms of both skilled and unskilled labor needs. And we know that housing and quality of life is an issue. We compete very keenly with Duluth. We want people, though, to live and work in Superior, in Wisconsin, and not in Minnesota. So how do we partner with the community to create attractions, recreation that can keep people in our community, as well as try to partner with our economic development agencies to create, I'll call it, new opportunities to diversify our economies, to keep them strong. So it's kind of a slightly different tact, but certainly would help address some of the things related to workforce and employment.
Could I ask you, just before I go on to Melissa, to talk about timelines? I mean, does that factor into the planning? So we say that this is an issue now, we need to address it. We're looking, as Steve suggested, of having to find 1,000 people. And you say, so we need workforce, so we need transportation, and we need housing. Are people talking about how this federal money applies on a timeline? So if we start now, when does this come online? Or how do we get from point A to point B and manage that without, is there any of that conversation going on, or is it pretty much just targeted at what we should spend it on?
No, I think there is conversation, and it hasn't been figured out yet, because there's several major initiatives that the city, let's say for instance, and county are working on. There's projects that we're working on collaboratively, and I think people know that it's a finite resource, and so I think they really are trying to be good stewards to figure out what will be the best return. So there's urgency, but not urgency at the same time.
Okay. Melissa, let me ask you to add to the comments that you made in the first session, but also bump up against this question. Governor Thompson, President Thompson, now I guess I have to keep reminding myself, talked about, bring me the problem, okay? We want to be problem solvers, and we have the chancellors in these programs. Has there been any talk in your community, in your area, about what the university could do, or what the tech college system could do, or what your K-12 system could do, or what your Chamber of Commerce could do? Do you see these as resources, and if so, what do you need?
Yeah, we're so fortunate where I'm at in Trempealeau County in that we have UW-Eau Claire just to the north, and then UW-La Crosse just to the south, and we're kind of situated right in between. And then a strong technical college presence where Western Technical College actually has a campus located in the center of our county. And so, we do have that presence. I do feel like this is an opportunity to strengthen those connections a little bit, to think about how we can move forward with this gift of funding and look at those partnerships. So, I had encouraged in the last session to get a lot of players at the table when it comes to partnerships and decision making on how we're going to spend this money in a way that benefits a lot of people, and not just people who are in municipal government, who tend to kind of look the same and be the same sometimes, but to ask other people, ask working parents, ask people who are caring for older parents. I really appreciate the chancellor's comments about flexibility. I think going forward that to attract and retain workers, that we are going to have to change a little bit how we do things. And I know that this is a workforce development, but I do kind of feel like a cog in the wheel a little bit. Like, you must put your children in childcare so you can go to work for the machine. And I would like I appreciate her comments about flexibility, because I would, as a working parent, I would like a little bit of flexibility that when my children do go to childcare or to school, which hopefully that this happens in the future, that they're in a place where they're safe and they have a quality education and experience. And experiences aren't and shouldn't just be limited to schools too. Like, I feel like there's other opportunities in the community, whether that's through recreation programs, arts and culture, the libraries, to really cast the net out a little bit with this funding opportunity to increase those. And that is a quality of life thing that people who are in the workforce are looking for, some of those other tertiary activities and investments too.
Great, thank you. Adam, in the first session, you talked about your heads of government group that gets together and talks about how to tackle some of these issues. And I know in the Milwaukee area, there's a group called the Higher Education Resource Alliance that's doing a similar kind of thing for the educational community. In those meetings, do your heads of government talk about not duplicating service and how this collaboration might play out as we try to make adjustments, whether it's to deal with childcare or deal with transportation or whatever? How does that set of conversations go?
Thank you, Jim. Our heads of government, it's a chief elected official of each unit of government. And we've been getting together for probably the last 20 years. And the beauty of it is we have relationships established. And when we need to get together and talk about opportunities to problem solve, we know one another. And that's exactly what we're doing now. We're talking about how we leverage these ARPA funds to make sure we're getting the biggest bang for our buck, investing in key priorities where we can make long-term positive impacts on the community. So I'm so grateful we have this group. I'm grateful we have the Sheboygan County Economic Development Corporation, United Way, Chamber of Commerce, really encourage people throughout the state, local leaders to engage these groups as they talk about how to wisely spend these funds. So we're just on the cusp of that. Just as you and others have said, we're not rushing this process. We're looking to bring people together of all walks of life and really focus on some of these key opportunities and where are we going to get the best bang. And again, we're looking at affordable housing, access to childcare, broadband is a big issue, transportation. But I didn't mention this at the first session, but I wanted to share and just pause for a second. This is such a remarkable invigorating time. We've all just come out of one heck of a difficult year and a half. I mean, we can see the light at the end of the tunnel of COVID. Though we're communicating in different means more than ever before, we're all hungry, I think, to get back together and really start focusing on other opportunities in our community. We know that there's, for some time, that our population was going to go down. We've had 4,000 open jobs at Kohler, Sargento, Johnsonville, many pillars in our businesses in our community before COVID. I mean, we knew this was coming. We knew that we had a housing shortage. And the beauty of this situation and the beauty of the ARPA funds and the investment we can make is the very conversation we're having today. It's bringing us all together, and we're focusing in, and we're talking about how we can problem solve and further improve our communities. And I so welcome this opportunity and so enjoy collaborating with others to problem solve. When we pull together, we move mountains, we get things done. And there's no question in my mind in Sheboygan County and throughout the state, we're going to make some wise, thoughtful investments to further improve our communities, attract and retain. And we're talking about some of those very issues today. So I appreciate it.
Thanks, Adam. So, Mayor Dennis, let me ask you, so you're facing this 1,000-person shortage over the next few years. And you hear Adam talking about his group and they're enthused, et cetera. Where do you find yourself in that process in terms of specific thoughts, initiatives, challenges, barriers? What does that look like close up?
Well, and I think Jared Shane talked at the beginning of, we've got rural part community of the county where people come work in the city of Marinette, and they live sometimes outside of the county. We've tried to really look at the housing as our biggest need right now, because those workers need to live somewhere. So we've recently collaborated with the county. We've looked at in-rem properties, stuff that goes back to the tax rolls. Can we rehab it, get it back on the tax rolls? Can we demo the stuff that's beyond repair? We're starting development agreements as a pilot program to bring builders. Let's infill these properties and add some stock. We know we need the larger developments and housing complexes that we're working with other developers, but it's kind of a combination of a lot of approaches. And I think you're right. It does need some collaboration and pooling funds, because as I think several have said, everyone is going to line up and tell us how we should spend this money quickly. But if we need to look at the longer term and what it means to bring people here, and getting back to the pandemic, is people, I think in Wisconsin, we've got the unique resources, the outdoors, and all the assets of Wisconsin, that people are moving from the bigger cities to towns and smaller communities because they want to get to a different way of life, back to the basics, family, friends. And as part of that, you need to figure out how to let them do their work from any part of the rural community. That's broadband and everything else that goes with it. So there's a whole lot of challenges, but there's a whole lot of opportunity, I think.
Chancellor, let me put you on the spot here, again, vis-a-vis Governor Thompson's comments. So you're listening to a county leader, you're listening to a mayor talk about what they're doing, the kinds of things that opportunities they're looking at. Is there a role for the campuses in this process, whether it's a research role or an information sharing role or a things we haven't thought about role? And what's out there that we could be doing?
I think, that concept of partnership, there's a number of ways that we consider ourselves really great partners. One is, if we just talk about development of the workforce, we've been trying to make sure that we are engaged in the ETPL systems, incumbent workforce training, certificate programs, distance learning, all designed to do that. So it's having those conversations with employers to say, what do you need? How can we help you skill up or deliver other skills? The second is, we're doing things with our city that we're calling P3 partnerships. So it's a public-private partnership for the development of facilities that will benefit not just the university, but the broader community and perhaps drive tourism. And at the same time, create opportunities for other things that the city and the county might need. And that we're looking at options including, is it a childcare facility that would be attached? Is it delivering more mental health services? Is it something associated with hotel or tourism? So I think those kind of opportunities exist to have those conversations with the universities. They can be real players in helping drive economic development. I think if the project that we're working on comes through, it will transform one of the gateways into the city. And that's important because when you're talking about the attractiveness of your community and quality of life of your community, that project alone would make a huge difference. We're also partnering in talking about things like new urbanism, the power of place. If you have 10 things in your community, then those 10 things have 10 things to do associated with it. How do you create vibrant communities based on that? So we've actually helped the city do a branding study, for instance, looking at attractors and detractors as we start thinking about power of place and how to leverage and build our community. So I just would encourage to say everything from economic development to research to delivering programs for the workforce. There's just tons of ways that we're trying to be good partners in building Wisconsin.
Okay, I'd like to ask each of you to talk to the private sector for a minute about, what we should be doing. What can employers be doing that we're not already doing? Or what are we doing that's making a difference that we should do more of? Okay.
We're listening to our business community, and again, fortunate we have this Economic Development Corporation with so many of our pillars on it, and they're sharing with us, obviously, their dire concern with workers and the inability to find workers, and that we've got headquarters here of Sargento, Johnsonville, others that they may not expand or they may ultimately have to move if we don't find the workforce they need. So it's critically important, and I can assure you they want to partner with local government to help solve these problems. So for folks across the state struggling with this, as we all are, it's essential to have that dialogue with your I call them some of the pillars of your community, but the businesses that really drive and invested in your community, and make sure that you're meeting them halfway and talking about transportation and enhancing that, talking about childcare and enhancing that, talking about broadband and how we get that out throughout the community, and what are they willing to do? What are they willing to do to be part of that solution? And I think where we're blessed and grateful here in Sheboygan County is that our businesses truly have the means to step up and be part of that solution. But you have to have the discussion. You have to engage. And of course, I was appreciated the chancellor's comments. We're also blessed to have UW Sheboygan here and LTC and Lakeland University, and engaging all of them to help with that discussion, collaboration, pulling together, just so essential. So we shouldn't be afraid to ask one another for help and ideas and to pull together. We need to do that. And when we do, we get things done.
I agree. We have a good working relationship with our business partners. They reach out to us and we ask what their biggest need is to bring workforce in. They can't meet the need, not only before the pandemic, but certainly now. Part of that, I think they need to become, just as much engaged in the community as everyone else is. They want the workers here. They need to have a community that's welcoming. I think there's been more effort and progress in the last several years on working with the technical college and the UW campus here in Marinette to get their workers trained and keeping those workers here, and then still have the ability to, remote do learning. So it's a new concept, but if you can get those younger talent to stay here instead of just coming and going somewhere else, I think the business have been really engaged. Internship program, I think they need to get these younger folks to understand what the job is and what it means. You don't have to move to have a very good quality of life. And I think all those partnerships and the businesses need to keep engaged in the community, because I think that just adds to keeping people here and attracting more people.
Yeah, boy, I'll echo the same. You know, one of the things we've really taken a strong interest in over the last years, knowing that we're trying to keep those students of all ages, and that ranges everything from veterans to your typical 18 to 21-year-old, is internships, what we call service learning, which means taking what you're learning in the classroom and applying it by helping a business do something. Anything that's going to get them connected and engaged does make a difference because they stay. And so those kinds of programs, but also youth development, youth leadership programs, taking them on tours around our communities so they get to see what the opportunities are. And then for our young professionals, we've brought them together in a group and are supportive of a group called Superior Young Professionals that is designed to be networking for those of kind of similar age, because you want to keep that group active and vibrant and engaged, is another way that we're trying to address this.
So, you know, all of those are great suggestions for, you know, community partnership and collaboration. And if I were going to speak just from the town perspective, it's that I'm going to be honest, we are using some of the funding for some repairs, necessary repairs to the town hall. But we are working with local businesses on that. And I do, you know, I look at that multiplier effect of trying to keep this money within our community as much as possible. And so, you know, I know that there's going to be more guidance coming down, and there's a little bit of guidance issued already, but you know, we've already been working with a couple local businesses on how we're going to use those funds locally to help repair and add to our town hall, so that it's going to have a community effect too. Like, we're going to use it as a cooling shelter for when people, if we, you know, have an emergency or there's a heat wave or something has happened. But we are working with a couple local businesses on that project as well. So that's really the only thing I have to add on that.
And just a quick follow-up, Jim, I wanted to add 3 specific suggestions. One, our local companies have invested right in the high schools to provide training opportunities where they bring their machinery in, their processing lines, what have you. So the high school students have the ability to work directly on what they would be working on if they worked at that employer. So they've made investments in the high schools. We've made investments with childcare, where maybe the county, as I mentioned at the earlier session, establishes a building or the framework, provides the infrastructure, and the private sector comes in and operates the childcare. And then just through our Sheboygan County Economic Development Corporation, in the last 3 weeks, we decided to co-invest in Discover Wisconsin and have more focus on our community workforce opportunities, quality of life, the balance that we all look for to help, again, recruit, retain employees. So some 3 quick suggestions of things that we have done or are doing to help address some of these workforce needs.
So let me piggyback on mine. So in terms of the next question. So what is clear is that all of you, both in this panel and the previous panel, are working on the issues that are in front of us, okay? Different levels of complexity, different kinds of challenges, but there's clearly a dialogue going on between elected officials and the private sector, between the private sector, elected officials, and the academic community and the teaching community. And there's some good things going on, and you're pleased about that. And yet we are still short 1,000 workers as we look at it. And yet we are still short, you know, lots and lots of people, and yet we still don't have some of the funding we need for certain kinds of things. Are we not telling the story? Are we not aware of the energy that's out there? Is that part of the challenge, that we're great and nobody knows it? Is that a piece of the challenge? Is a piece of the challenge that we don't really have a recruitment strategy per se? And again, you've heard me say this, Adam. We know that the people we want to hire are trying to deal with debt management and childcare and housing issues and some quality of life stuff. We know that other states are running programs that are more successful in some of the stuff we've put out there. Okay? And yet we still we have not figured out how to empower our employers to be competitive in some of those fields. So is that a piece of the equation? And I find myself sometimes persuaded that we do programs better than anybody in the world, but that we're not great at translating the programs into critical mass in terms of achieving strategic results. Is that an unfair observation?
My comments, I mean, if you listen to somebody like President Thompson, you get excited. And I do think we limit sometimes, we don't brag enough about our assets and the great things we have to offer. I mean, our own campus here in town, I mean, it's a hidden gem, and I think the new leadership is taking and promoting, hey, we have a UW system here. We have a technical college. We have great schools. We're investing back in the community, over 30 million with the new referendum. We don't probably sell ourselves enough, and as a state, it's the same thing. And yes, we do have challenges with trying to get the workers here, to get them trained, to get the housing, and to get the childcare. Those are things that maybe leadership from the state need to help us with. I think the funding will help us meet some of that need. But yeah, I think it's a big picture, and I think we need a big cheerleader, for the state as well as the local level.
Has there been any conversation either in your local government circles, Mayor, or in your broader groups about the possibility of some of this money going to energize strategy and management going forward?
I think those discussions are just beginning, and I think this is a perfect opportunity to, expand those discussions. Like I said earlier, everyone wants to put their, where the money can be spent as quickly as possible, but that's not necessarily the best. And really combining those funds, when we go after grants and we can do matches locally and combine those with state or federal funds, that's huge. That's windfalls that we would never be able to support bigger projects for. So I think the discussion is starting, and I think this is just one more opportunity for us to expand those discussions.
Okay, good. So let me give you an opportunity to raise questions you would like to raise, either with each other or with state government or with President Thompson or with Competitive Wisconsin or whatever. I mean, again, as you think about the meetings you're going to have next week on this, okay? What do you wish you knew more about? Okay.
I wish we had a better understanding of the state's overall big picture of leadership. When we look at our state legislature and our governor, and I always look for the good in people, but there's so much discourse. And as you know, Jim, it seems like it's getting worse rather than better. But we have to make investments in Wisconsin. Quality of life is so good here, and it can only get better with good investments. And sometimes I think from a state level standpoint, we focus so much on property tax levy caps and limits rather than the investments we can make to make our communities even better and stronger, that going forward, that's going to need to be revisited. Also, to the point of the cheerleader, it was so refreshing to hear Governor Thompson speak again. I admired him back when he was governor because he was such a cheerleader and a problem solver. And here he is, still in public service, fighting the good fight, trying to make his state stronger. And I so respect and appreciate his passion for our state. And we all need to do a better job in that area. I think Wisconsinites tend to be humble and down to earth, and we do what we can to get the job done, but we probably don't tout our communities and the quality of life enough. I think sometimes we take it for granted if we live here, and then people come and visit and they're like, wow, do you have a remarkable community, state, all the wonderful things we have going on. So this conversation, of course, today is with all our friends and local government for the most part. We need to engage our state leadership and our state leaders and make sure that we're on the same page with them and pulling together to make wise investments. And yeah, a little more cheerleading wouldn't be bad to get more people from across the country looking at relocating and working and raising their families here in the state of Wisconsin.
So let me package it up differently. All sorts of good ideas, all sorts of good things going on. I guess my question is, where's the business plan that would take the question about timelines, that would take the question about funding, that would take the question about collaboration, but focus it on a set of specific objectives? For example, Tommy talked today about declining enrollment. In the 5 states surrounding Wisconsin, there are millions of young people in high schools who are within 300 miles of your cities, your campus. And you say, why aren't we targeting that population? Why aren't we? Is that an investment that we should be looking at? Is the university prepared to do that? I know that most of the campuses I'm familiar with have made an effort to reach across borders and to try to do some bits and pieces. You know, I'm one of those people who thinks it's ridiculous that we charge people more to come to Wisconsin when we are a short worker. I think the rest of us ought to be doing all the rest of that. Pardon me for offering an opinion there, but Chancellor, I'll go to you first and let you chime in here.
Yeah, you know, we actually are being really aggressive in trying to bring students into the state, because we know, kind of like all of us who are up here, once you're up here, you sort of fall in love with the place. And we know if we can get them here, they will stay here. And so that kind of partnership is a good partnership. And I would agree with some of the other comments, is that, you know, we don't always have an organized game plan as a state. And we do need to do some more, and we do need to cheerlead more, because I've been, I don't know, 4 states, 5 states, and this is by far the jewel. So I share President Thompson's enthusiasm, and I think we need to go out and go get them.
Very good. Other questions people might have. I'm going to ask our context advisors to chime back in here. So Matt, if I could ask you could we dig a little deeper on what you're describing as a lack of mobility, okay? So I understand that. Is it the numbers that you share, as I remember them, indicate there's clearly been shifts from rural areas to urban areas over the years. I am guessing that the mobility numbers change based upon age. Is there anything in there that you can share with us that might help us understand what we're looking at?
Yeah, certainly the shift across the United States and across certainly Wisconsin, the upper Midwest, towards an older population has driven some of those migration rates down. As you get older in life, you're certainly less likely to move, especially long distances. You're kind of rooted in place. So that explains a good chunk of what we're seeing here. But there's been some interesting research that also looks at kind of the returns to an individual or the benefits they get in making that type of move. It used to be that if you were, say, a computer programmer, you had to go to Silicon Valley or you had to go to Seattle and to go where a thick labor market was for that type of occupation. Now we have much more opportunities for those types of occupations across both large metro areas, small metro areas, and even rural areas, especially with opportunities to telecommute. So people are less likely to make that kind of big jump to a place because they do not get as big of benefits as they did years and years ago. There's also this kind of opportunity that we're seeing in terms of people that really want to be close to home. So what we see is that there was a paper that just came out of the Philadelphia Fed that looked at home attachment. And what they're saying is that people more and more, especially as kind of our population growth has converged across the United States, they want to live close to where they grew up. And what we're seeing is that a lot of people that do move to a state from another state are people that grew up in that state originally. So they want to come home. So when I think about opportunities to bring people to Wisconsin, our real opportunity is to look at those boomerangers somewhere else and have an opportunity to come back here and start a career or raise a family.
What kind of numbers are we talking about there? When you say the boomerang boom, are the numbers substantial enough?
In terms of propensity of people to move, you are twice as likely to move back to your home state if you move somewhere else than to move somewhere other than your home state. So in terms of total numbers, I can't list those off the top of my head, but we can certainly figure it out. But again, it is an opportunity for the state to bring people back here because they do have an attachment.
Okay.
I know I'm breaking protocol, but can I ask a question?
Yes.
Okay, when we discuss attraction, do we do a study on if 28% of childcare costs are on the income, what level does it have to decrease to make us attractive? Like if the cities were to incentivize childcare when it comes to that first, if it's a 16% return, we know that that's coming to our area anyway. So if it was to decrease that by 16%, does that equate? Has that been figured out? Has there been a study in that? That's my question.
So well, Matt and others pondered. A woman named Ruth Schmidt is in one of our other breakout sessions, and Ruth is the head of the Wisconsin Early Childhood Association. And I would bet money that she has some information for you on that. The other piece I would raise, Mayor, on that is, as this is a classic example of, as we're using the word childcare as opposed to the term childcare education and education, childcare and education. And Dennis, feel free to chime in here. There is a growing interest in the concept of early childhood development because of the potential return on investment of 13 to 1 as opposed to what we thought it was, which was 7 to 1. And so when you think about investing in child care, one of the questions that probably should be on the table is, are you talking about child care, or are you talking about the capacity to expand that into early childhood development? So if the short-term need is child care, but the long-term advantage, particularly from an attraction point of view, would be for Wisconsin to become a leader in early childhood development. So that would, if that was across the state a quality product, there are a number of people, myself included, who believe that would be a marketable advantage for the state and for communities.
No, I agree. It's something that we've looked at even here is people invest in their children. It's a four-part quality in their quality of life, one that they hang their hat on. I was just wondering if there was a marketability study done on it to back.
I would bet money that there has been some work done. So we'll see if we can't track that down. Okay.
And just let me comment, Jim, on there have been I've seen a lot of studies on the quality of the returns on local communities that have instituted early childhood development programs, right? There's also a lot of data on cost of living by actually some pretty detailed geographies, and some of the methodologies equate things across the board. But the biggest difference there is housing costs. As you look at food and you look at clothing and then the other, those aren't so out of whack from community to community. The biggest thing that influences the cost of living is housing. Again, if you're comparing, Trempealeau County to Milwaukee to San Francisco type thing, right? But some of the work we've done too is what you see in the essentially the normalization of all of that is because, San Francisco costs 2.5 times to live in than does, Wausau. You see actually the breakdowns if you adjust for earnings, that the gap's not nearly that big, right? So it does boil down then to a preference of where you want to live. And as Matt was talking about, maybe there's some more ability for that with what we've learned through COVID and our telecommunication abilities. And yet the infrastructure of that is going to have to be ramped up monumentally in order for that to be ubiquitous across everywhere. So that's what we know and that's what we see. And over time, it's gonna tell us what the population migrations have been. And if you got a great quality of life, we like to tout it. We as I say, we kind of preaching to the choir here in Wisconsin, right? And does it resonate? I mean, why is Denver growing like it is? Why is Bend, Oregon growing like it is? Why is Nashville growing like it is? Because there's something in those communities, right, that is attracting people there. The local Denverites, you know, they talk about, well, Denver isn't what it used to be, right? It has changed. But what is it that those communities are offering, right, that's different than what we can offer in the state of Wisconsin? So we're not alone in this. Everybody's going to be competing for talent, and so you really got to step up and target the audience that you want to bring in.
We have 5 minutes left. I'm being informed here. Okay. Let me throw it open. Other people have questions that they would like to ask either the context analysts or the panel, local leader panels.
I'm joining late, so I apologize if this has been touched on, but I'm wondering what the effect of our national immigration policy has on these workforce shortages in the state.
You know, well, I think when we talk about migration, you know, we're usually talking about, you know, state by state migration, because that's, you know, the most of the migration anyway. But, you know, we have to also nationally, because this is a problem nationally, so we have to talk about international migration, and we have to figure out in Washington how we're going to, you know, change our immigration policy, you know, and you know, legally to, you know, to help solve some of these problems. The challenge is, you know, a lot of the countries that migrate here are having similar problems, you know, in terms of demographics. But we're still a great place. People want to come here, and you know, that has to be. I guess my comment would be that has to be part of the discussion. And yet, I'm not very optimistic that we're going to see anything in the near future.
And I'll say that for the past 15 years or so, without international migration to the state of Wisconsin, our overall migration would have been negative for the state. So it was offsetting our negative net domestic migration. So it's been a big part of our population growth.
Yeah, and I think the other observation I would make is if you look back over the last 10 or 15 years, the impact was and is predominantly on our agricultural community in terms of different kinds of uses and our tourism industry. If you look at where we're going forward in terms of technology, the lack of a coherent immigration policy will make it increasingly difficult to find the technical skilled people that we're looking for, not just in agriculture and tourism, but also in manufacturing. So that it is becoming more of an issue than I think it has in the past. I think there's a tendency to view it predominantly as an agricultural issue related to countries south of our borders. And it's broader than that. And I think we need to be smart enough to understand that.
Immigration is certainly one prong for supply, right? And to the other point, I think it was Jenny, that, yeah, talking to the hospitality industry, right, and the companies and the associations, the cutback in the visas that they use to bring in immigrants or part-time visa workers, certainly in places like the Dells, right, Yellowstone, those kind of things, has definitely impacted their supply of workers into this season.
Any other comments? All right, then I think we are within 1 minute. They're going to shut us down anyways. So thank you all very, very much for your comments, your time, your interest.